This is from the Locked On Browns podcast that shows. Interesting topic. Kevin Stefanski's overhauled offense. Do you think it provides hope for the Browns?
I do. And the premise of that segment was I used some of the quotes from Joel Bitonio the other day at the Browns Foundation golf tournament, where he flat out said, we're going back to 2020, 2021. Like what the offense looked like back then is more of what you're going to see, more of what you're going to get. And I like that. It's not a surprise. Like I know Dave, like you and I have talked about that. I've talked about that with other people. I've talked about that on the podcast. We all kind of knew that was where it was headed, but to hear somebody say it, I think was huge. And I do think that should provide some hope for a season that most people assume is just like over before it even started, right? And I know like the win total in Vegas is 5.5. I've said all along, like if they can get competent offense, the offense was the problem last year. The defense, by and large, I didn't expect them to be as dominant as 2023 because defenses year to year can just be so different. It's kind of like bullpens in baseball in that way. And so like did they probably take a step back? Yeah. But I also think like you go back and watch some of those games, they were the reason the Browns were like down a single possession sometimes like in the second half because they had kept them in it despite having short fields to work with and all these different things. The offense was just so bad. And so if you go back to the basics here of Kevin Stefanski's system, if you feel like with the running back tandem you've created with Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson, that they are, that they can sort of become that 1-2 punch that you used to have with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And you have a quarterback that can at least run the offense effectively without turning the ball over so much. You're bound to see some an uptick for this team just in general from last season. It's not I don't expect it to be quite as bad. So I do think there's a little bit of room for hope. I'm not saying I'm going to sit here and predict the Browns to be a playoff team. I'm not saying I'm going to predict them to be a Super Bowl team at all. But I do think like if you're looking for some reason for optimism this season, going back to Stefanski's offense and the way guys are talking about like this is our identity and we think getting back to this is going to help us and understanding what went wrong last year, I think there's reason to believe that maybe people have written this team off as just being completely terrible again. And I think there's something there that can at least sell you on the idea that like they might not be great, but they're not going to be necessarily as bad as they were last season. And frankly, there's probably a number of people's jobs that depend on not being as bad as last year.
The thing that's interesting to me is the guys that are most excited about that offense and going back to it seem to be the offensive linemen, which should be that should be a really good thing for the run game, is because they want to get back to that.